I'm joined today with Baghai, who is an award-winning filmmaker, scuba diver, and he's based in Sydney, Australia. And we're here to talk about his latest film, Diving into the Darkness. We're hopefully going to be joined by Jill Heinerth as soon as possible, having some technical difficulties with time zones, because myself, I'm in the United Kingdom, Nays is in Sydney, Australia, and Jill is in Ottawa, Canada. So the time difference has confused us. But yeah, if you do have any questions for them, by all means, pop them down into the chat, and we'll see if we can get to them. But welcome, Nays. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me so much. I appreciate it a lot.
So I've seen the film. It was incredible. I did a reaction to the trailer part because I didn't want to give too much away here on YouTube. But I did have some questions about it. The first one. So diving into the darkness goes beyond just documenting a cave diver. What message or theme were you hoping to convey to the audience when you were creating Diving into the Darkness?
That's a great question. To be honest, I didn't want to be too didactic about it. I mean, I like my audiences to just, take what they want, however they wish from whatever I make. So it's really open to interpretation. But if I were to pinpoint one theme that, underlies the whole film, I would say it is fear versus fascination. So I mean, it's really like, a core concept in cave diving, how you control fear as opposed to like getting rid of it entirely. And the other thing
Mhm.
is that how that curiosity will lead you to do the most incredible things that you can do. And I really wanted to, you know, eradicate the reputation that cave diving has as like a suicidal daredevil sport and instead show how it really is kind of a lot more multifaceted and fascinating than more people give it credit for.
Mm. It is incredible. I've always looked at cave diving. I've dabbled, but nothing anywhere as severe as these kind of sort of caves and systems. I'm a bit more of an open water kind of diver. And we were talking earlier about the film. I was asking if we call it a documentary or or a documentary film or just a film. And you said you kind of wanted to steer more away from the documentary sort of typeset.
Yeah, well, I feel like the documentary is a bit of a dirty word as far as genres goes, because like most people think it's like eating your vegetables when you'd much rather be eating something much more flavorful. So I thought, why not? I guess like for me, like I started off at film school more as a fictional director who worked with actors. So documentary was just a way to like a means to an end for me. But one of the rules that we had when we were making this was don't pay attention to the way other previous diving documentaries have tackled the source material. Let's go for something fresher and more um what's the word, alive in terms of the cinematic influences. So we watched everything from Star Wars, Blade Runner, Lord of the Rings, Godfather, Touching the Void. We wanted the film to really have as diverse of influences as could possibly be. So I
Mm,
hope that when people are watching the film that they you know see the few tips of the hat that are present in the film.
yeah. So diving into the darkness boasts some incredible underwater footage. How did you just achieve such stunning visuals whilst navigating the challenging underwater environment of like cave systems as well, not just being underwater, but being underwater in cave systems?
Great question. Well, for starters, like I'm a planner. Like I like to go into the cave before I get to work. So before everyone arrived in Mexico, I spent 2 weeks, swimming through all these various different cave systems and figuring out, okay, this part works, this part doesn't work. And before that, I had prepared like I think it was 100-page encyclopedia with all sorts of storyboards, and I'm thinking how each of the shots can fit in certain places. And then when Yannick Suhonen and Rich Stevenson, the two amazing underwater cinematographers, showed up, we then got to work in thinking about how we could get the best shots, but just really adapt as we went along and communicate constantly. And the thing is that like the more it's a fine line between being really well prepared and having everything doing your homework, but not being too prescriptive. Like you need to kind of be adaptable to whatever the conditions and confines of the cave are like. So
Mm,
and you're communicating all of that. So we literally, in order to like keep everything fresh, we would meet in the dive shed every morning and go through the scene that we were shooting. I'd go first by describing, okay, this is what I want in terms of mood and other important elements. And these are the key shots that I want. And then Yane would interpret that so that he could kind of absorb all the shots, and he would draw diagrams of like where he wanted the cameras, the lights, and the divers. And it just kind of, it was like a ping pong game with the six of us where Jill would also comment on like, okay, this happened in real life and this is what we can do to make it better. And then Vince and Aria, our local safety divers and guides, would say, well, this part of the cave works for this, but this part doesn't. So it was a very strangely holistic way of filming in those caves.
mm. Yeah, because that was one of my questions. Is like, what's the pre-dive briefing going to be on one of these? Because it's not just we're going to enter the water here, we're going to dive until such and such, and we're going to go here, and then we're going to double back, and we're going to exit here. You've got to break down where each individual diver has to be at any given point because you're aiming for these kind of shots. And it's
Yeah.
not just when you see a single diver on the screen, what you don't see is first the person holding the camera, second the person who's holding the light from a different angle, so you get all these lighting effects, and you created some very incredible visuals throughout the entire documentary. Yeah, that's a lot of work and teamwork. And that leads me on to my next question, which is because diving alone and cave diving especially is such a team effort. How did you build trust and collaboration with Jill and the rest of the diving team to capture such like intimate moments like the restriction? How do you build trust throughout the entire team for stuff like
Oh,
that?
well, I think the thing is that because every like the I felt really relieved to be working with the best of the best in terms of like technical and cave divers. So everyone was just really focused on what do we need to do to get the shots. And there were a lot of safety procedures that we had placed. And one of the rules that we agreed on before we even got in the water is that no shot is worth anyone's life. And if anyone feels unsafe for any reason, there's the right to like give the thumbs up and abort. So it really like raised the bar for like, okay, this is not going to be a cowboyish, set where crew members' lives are put in jeopardy. And I think the other thing is, you know, 99% of the time, directors never get in the water. Like most of the times, they'll sit at the surface or worse, not even come to the location at all. And because I was a certified JJ diver at the time, and I took a cave course specifically for the sake of this project. I wanted to signal to everyone, look, I'm not letting you guys go in there risking your lives by yourselves just for the sake of a film. Like I'm coming in there with
Mm,
you. First of all, is your insurance policy, and secondly, um, that means that I can see what's going on down there and give real like practical feedback because I know what's possible and what's not possible. And
yeah.
I think because I started off as an underwater photographer and cinematographer, but this time let Yane and Rich take the driver's seats, it was in a strange way, it was easier for me to speak fluently in that regard as a director because it meant that I knew what they were going through. And while I would very much would have liked to have been the operator myself in many
Mm,
instances, it was very much a case of like, you know what, these guys are world class. Let them do what they do best. And this, it's really like one of the things about working on a film set, for those of who are tuning in, is that usually there can be quite a bit of a hierarchy on set, and like the director is like the boss and you don't question it, and it's very much like, you know, a general in soldiers. But in this instance, it was a lot more democratic and everyone had an equal say. In fact, I would
mhm.
say it's the environment on set was very comparable to what it's like on um, an expedition, like a cave expedition, in the sense that we're all on the same playing field and we all have the same job to do, which is get the shot.
Yeah, yeah. If anyone has a better idea or anyone has a question, they can pipe up, and it might change the entire thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're underwater, you say that whilst you're down there, you can make like little changes. How do you communicate those kind of complexities underwater? Is it all done on slates or something
We
else?
had a combination of methods. So first of all, we tried to get as much of it done, um, like all the important communication done before we got in the water, so that when we
Mhm.
got in there, it felt like we were on autopilot.
Yeah.
But of course, things go wrong when you're underwater. So the way that we did it is that being on a rebreather, you actually can talk through the loop, but you sound a bit like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. So it's like, can you move the camera to this bit so we could get to this? So that's, you can kind of understand each other to a certain degree, but I did keep wet notes. Shout out to Halcyon for the amazing wet notes that I had in order to scribble things down at the minute. And obviously there's sign language, so it's just like like just it's
Yeah.
it's fairly intuitive. But the good thing is that Rich, Yane, and Jill had dived together before many times, so they kind of figured out how to, you know, communicate with each other from past experience, and it felt like muscle memory to a certain degree. So yeah, it really is just a matter of being adaptable and figuring out, okay, what works best for the scene at hand that we're working with.
Mm. Yeah, just the logistics of kind of working those kind of things out. Because I've worked with like through water communications and hardwire communications and things, and even they fail at times. So yeah, sometimes it's best just to go to a notebook and show someone, I want this. What are your hopes for the impact of diving into the darkness, and how do you see it influencing the public perception of cave diving?
That's a Again, you know how to ask these really deep questions. No pun intended. I would say that my hope is that people become more appreciative of not just the underwater of caves, but just the underwater environment in general, and understand that it's not as scary as ominous as people like to make it out. And in fact, it's a really life-changing thing, and that, but ultimately, it's a very introspective world to be part of. And of course, you know, Jill is a massive inspirational figure to all of us, and I want people to be really touched by her message and the all the amazing things that she's accomplished. And I think that really the again, like I feel like the a lot of documentaries have misconstrued diving into something that it's really not. So I wanted to be, um you know, take advantage of my role as someone who's kind of a translator between the two different roles, and so we're different worlds, and really feel like the really tell an authentic story that had something, you know, that resonated with anyone around the world. I mean, if you love the movie, then that makes my day to hear, and if you didn't like it, then that's fine too. Just send me a comment and we'll hash it out.
Yeah, because in the movie it does talk about the dangers of cave diving, but also on the flip side of it, you see all of these amazing things that Jill and plenty of other cave divers have been doing, and it's yeah, as long as you do it properly, yeah, it is a perfectly safe sort of place to be. There are inherent dangers, but those can be mitigated, which is always sort of fascinating. And I really enjoyed the progress of technology going
Mm.
through the ages, because Jill's been doing it for years now, and I always found that fascinating, and to look at the different equipment that she and other cave divers are using. In some situations, they'll use side mounts; on others, they'll use rebreathers. I presume you used more rebreathers than side mounts, more for
Yes.
the bubble free and dive longevity.
Yeah, I mean, I was just writing about this for Shearwater. I mean, we did debate like what was the best configuration for filming. Is it doubles, side mount, rebreathers? And for me, the advantages of rebreathers just outweigh the cons massively. And I mean, for those of you who aren't familiar with with rebreathers and what they afford, they basically allow you to stay 4 times longer plus than you would on normal single tank diving. And one of the other hidden advantages is when you're in a cave is because it's a closed circuit system, there's no exhaled bubbles that can dislodge the silt, which in turn falls down and ruins the visibility. So they just felt really, and for me also, like I hadn't yet learned how to dive side mount, and rebreathers were my personal favorite of all the configurations. And the final advantage that not many people know about is that unlike scuba, when you're on a rebreather, your buoyancy is not affected whatsoever by your breathing. So if you're in the midwater column and you're trying to hold a shot, rather than worrying about whether you're going and just losing the stability of that shot, it just makes it so much easier to stay still and hover like that. So
Yeah.
I'm team CCR.
Yeah. And even just the logistics of moving equipment to the dive site, instead of just cylinders and cylinders, you have small cylinders. You have a relatively large amount of like scrubber, but as far as like equipment, it's relatively compact.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jill just texted me and said that it's maxed out with guests. So I'm wondering if there's a way to
Oh,
let her in afterwards.
let me have a look. Uh, right, that's how to turn the camera around. Uh, oh, I don't know, because I'd really love. I've got questions for Jill. Uh, remove a guest. I can't add a guest. Oh
If you want,
no.
we can wrap up and then she just takes my seat afterwards.
Okay, I've asked all of my questions, Nays. It's not quite what I was planning, but thank you so very much for joining me, and it was lovely to meet you. And I wish all the best for diving into the darkness, and as many awards as possible going forward.
Thank you so much, Mark. I mean, thank it really means a lot to hear that from you. And, I'm glad that I could, make something that, people are happy to see. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk with you guys at the Scuba Diver Magazine family.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to try something new. We're going to see what's going to happen. I'm going to say goodbye to Nays, and I'm going to see if I can get Jill on the line. It might just be me waffling for a little bit until Jill joins us. So goodbye, Nays. Thank you so very much for joining me.
My pleasure. Bye bye.
Right, so it's just me. Here we go. Here's Jill, and hopefully she'll be joining us any second now.
Oh.
Hello, Jill.
I've been trapped in the internet.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No
For those of you
worries.
who don't know, I we've had a bit of time difference confusion. Yeah, because I'm
Mhm.
based in the United Kingdom, as I said at the start. Jill is in Ottawa, Canada, and I imagine something to do with daylight saving times. I apologize, that's my fault.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess the feed was maxed out and it wouldn't let me in.
I'm sorry. So yeah, I've just had a lovely chat with Nays, the director of Diving Into
Good.
the Darkness, and now I've got wonderful Jill. So for anyone who doesn't know, Jill is a Canadian cave diver. She's a storyteller, a filmmaker, photographer, just everything, and just an inspiration for a lot of divers around the world. Um, yeah, so the first question that I have is that the film explores the duality of the beauty and the dangers of cave diving. How do
Mhm.
you balance the just awe-inspiringness of being in these beautiful, just weird alien worlds with their like inherent risks of cave diving?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the risk has to be worth it. So I believe in sort of diving with a purpose in that regard, because I have to be able to justify to my husband, my family, why I take these risks. But for me, I pinch myself every day. It's such a special opportunity to be able to go to places where nobody's ever been before. But just because it's a dangerous environment doesn't mean I do things dangerously. I really take, safety and risk assessment incredibly seriously. And I believe that one of those, great rules of survivors is that we know when not to dive and we know when to turn around.
It's always a very important skills that I always
Hmm.
used to used to try and teach my students. Is just no one can force you to go on a dive. If there's anything that doesn't feel right at any time, you can just call the dive,
Hmm.
because you can always go back later. But yeah, no, that's uh, cave systems. I've been in some like overhead environments and things. It's not really my forte, especially
Hmm.
now that I have a family. But it's just incredible work that you do, and I try to get into the kind of it's not always just to go to these kind of places. There are
Hmm.
actual real world benefits. I think I saw one, I forget where it was, but they were saying that they found this underwater cave system and how like a farmer could lay down certain fertilizer on their field. It could seep down into this water system and then travel further and have repercussions further down. And if you didn't know this water system was there, you you'd have no idea. And but now that we're
Yeah.
mapping all of these things, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's also important for people to know though that just because I can't swim through a space doesn't mean that the water's not moving, laterally through the environment. So
Mm,
that farmer with too much, fertilizer can still, drastically affect our oceans because that water soaks into the ground regardless in between the grains of, sand and soil, and it moves from higher, altitudes to lower altitudes or lower water levels. So,
mm,
even if you live in the middle of, the UK, for instance, the ocean still begins beneath your feet.
yeah,
So I think as a cave diver, I can, be that canary in the coal mine or give people a sense of adventure that makes them want to tune in, but also share these important messages about water literacy because we're living in an era when we do need to better understand our water systems, our ice systems,
mm,
our planetary climate systems. And this diving audience that is immersed in the environment has a really good opportunity to shape perceptions and shape action in the future.
mm. You mentioned canary in the coal mine.
Mhm.
In the film, you talk about the progress of technology throughout your
Yeah.
career of diving. Do you ever think that like unmanned ROVs will ever replace an actual diver in the water to do problem solving? Do you think technology is ever going to get to that point?
They already have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I still work with Dr. Bill Stone that the viewers of the movie would have met in the movie, and that mapper that I drove back in 97, 98 is now a fully autonomous, artificially intelligent robot cave mapper. And as an example, a few years ago, I was down in the Channel Islands with Bill and on a project with Bob Ballard, and we could literally put sunfish in the water and just, on the edge of the Channel Islands and say, "Go fetch cave." Sunfish without a tether swims over, explores the, edge of the landscape till it finds an opening, swims into the cave, makes choices to turn left or right, and all the time it's mapping in 3D and bringing back that kind of information. So, yeah, AI and robots already have a big place. In
Mm,
exploration and in our industry, and for me watching that technology grow and seeing how a robot thinks as an explorer is fascinating. However, it can do, all these mechanical things, but I think at this point what AI is missing is that creativity that an explorer brings, and the experience of, oh
Mhm.
yes, well, if I feel the flow coming from this tunnel and it's greater, or I see the way the sand is sculpted or the rocks are sculpted, I may make a choice
Mhm.
to go left instead of right. So,
Yes.
I think the technology is promising, and it's going to accompany us into the depths and go to places that I can't get to, but I'm not worried about it sort of replacing my job.
Um, so in the film, um, it delves into your motivations for
Mhm,
cave diving. What was your
mhm.
initial spark into developing this passion for cave diving? What kind of took you from the schoolyard or wherever it is that just went, you know what, I'm going to do this.
Well, I always liked, like, small dark spaces. I know that sounds
Uh-huh.
crazy, but I was that little kid that would build a fort, underneath the kitchen sink kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
or in the top shelf of the closet in my bedroom. So I don't have an ounce of claustrophobia. I do have a fascination for these underground spaces, and looking back in a box of old things my mother shared from my school days, the first book that I wrote at age 6 was called Mysteries of the Underground. So
Yeah.
apparently, I had a fascination for caves, long before I ever considered that I'd be doing it underwater.
And
Um,
then you
but
combine the underwater aspects.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel honestly like an earthbound astronaut, because I mean, we know so
Mm,
much more about space than we do about caves and inner space, and here is this vast, reservoir of of knowledge that's just waiting for us to, unveil, and
mm.
so yeah, I feel a bit like an astronaut when I go cave diving.
And some of the equipment that you're wearing as well is very, very cool. All the rebreathers and everything. I presume
Mhm.
most, because we see you on side mount and sort of back mount
Yeah,
rebreathers. Was
yeah.
it just a combination in this documentary? Just whatever was the most practical for that particular dive at the time?
Well, for the documentary, we were trying to mirror, my life experiences, and match some of that archival footage of mine with recreations, and so that's why we made the missed lunar, I call it, because the cis lunar was my first, big rebreather back in the 90s.
uh,
But yeah, for me, rebreathers versus side mount versus single tank, it's always about what is the right tool for the job.
yeah,
And it's actually interesting because sometimes in the film recreations, we were using shallow places as a replacement for some of the deep exploration that I'd done, because you can't tell by looking at a cave whether it's
sure,
deep or
yeah,
shallow. But as anyone that dives a rebreather knows, working in the shallows with a rebreather is the most frustrating in terms of buoyancy and gas consumption. And some of these, recreations, we have to shoot multiple angles, multiple takes. And so I'm constantly, swimming up and down from 60 to surface, or 20 meters to the surface, and
yeah,
back and
yeah.
forth, and absolutely like destroying my ears in the process.
Yeah, I was talking with Nays about the logistics of communicating underwater and trying to
Mm,
just get that right shot and how you communicate in that, because you weren't using like through water communications, it was hand signals
right. Yeah.
and just talking through the loop and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's that's always fascinating. The documentary mentions your childhood dream of becoming a strong inspiration for women in particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
How has your cave diving experiences helped you fulfill that dream?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. When I was a little kid, kind of dreaming about being a diver, dreaming about being an explorer, it was hard to find women role models. Certainly no direct ones, but I read books and watched TV shows, and I was always seeking out women as role models. And back in the 90s, I actually started a little magazine called Women Underwater, that
That's
my
cool.
friend Patty Mortar and I actually printed in black and white and mailed it around to the dozen of her female cave divers and tech divers around the world. Um,
Yeah.
so, and as a young person, there were a lot of doors sort of closed in my face. I mean, when a young person is aspiring to do something perhaps unconventional or out of the norm, it's really easy to discourage them. It's really easy to kind of slam a door in their face, like when they don't have the confidence to say, "Well, why can't I do this?"
Yeah.
Um, and so that is an important goal to me. I want to see lots more women in diving, lots more women, technical diving instructors,
Mm,
I just want to see that the equity across the board, because I think that it benefits the whole community. Really, there's no
yeah.
reason why a woman can't do anything in this field.
No, I feel very disparaged when I'm sort of looking through like scuba Reddit, social media, and those kind of things, and people are like, oh no, no, no. It's like, don't be like that. Don't close doors. Just say, oh, okay,
Yeah,
you want to do this? Cool. This will probably be the best thing.
yeah,
I mean, what would be your recommendations for any diver? Female or male who wants to get into like cave explorations, what would you
yeah,
recommend
yeah.
they have as like a foundation, or
Hmm.
who to talk to? What would you
Yeah.
recommend?
I mean, first of all, recognize that it's achievable for anyone at any age. I mean, one of my oldest cavern diving students was in her 70s, and funny enough, when she showed up for class, she camped in a tent for the class.
That's
I'm like, okay,
cool.
you go.
Yep.
And I mean, as an example from the UK, John Buxton, great underwater cave explorer, dry cave explorer too, was cave diving on his 80th birthday at Wookie.
Yeah,
So
I wish
know
I
that
could
you
do
can do it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Second of all, like, dedicate yourself to getting good training. It's not cheap, but pick
Mm,
someone who's experienced, who is not just teaching, but is teaching and diving, doing both of
yeah.
those things and gaining experience. And then understand yourself that you can't just sort of go class, 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 class. You really do need to develop experience. You need to have a few scares. You need to get yourself out of trouble, solve your issues underwater, and gain some wisdom
Mm,
before you go off trying to lay line at the end of the cave. Like, financially, you can walk into any dive shop and buy the greatest tools for exploration today, but you need time and experience and practice
mm,
to achieve it.
yeah.
So just go. Dive, dive,
Yeah.
dive.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me for oh, what do I need to do, or what do I need, and that is it. It's really the dives where something bad happens are the ones that teach you the most, because you learn those kind of precursors, and you can just adapt your diving going forwards. And there was actually a question from the chat. Adam Reed asks, in your documentary you describe DCI
Yeah.
and the resulting time spent in the chamber. How has this changed your diving today? And do you ever look back thinking you could have prevented it?
That's a great question. I'm a much better, wiser diver today for sure. There's nothing like a DCS hit to really kind of knock you down a few pegs and make you reflect upon the risks that you take and how you dive.
Mm,
Could I have prevented it? Probably not. I was doing an identical dive to my male partner on that dive, and my male partner was older and maybe not even as fit as me. So we know that we're still guinea pigs in a way, especially for technical diving and especially for women, because there's just not that many dives that have built a statistical database. But anybody that dives is just diving on a mathematical algorithm that we keep tailoring year after year and refining and improving. But there are
mm,
never guarantees that you won't get bent. I mean, some of my close friends, badass tech divers, have been bent in 20 meters of water. So it
yeah,
happens. There might be
yeah.
physiological predispositions, or it just might be your day.
Mm,
But it's not the end of the world. And if you suspect that you could be bent, I mean, even just the littlest niggle that you could be bent, you know, treat early and take it seriously. Don't be embarrassed. It's a sports
yeah,
injury,
yeah.
and
It's
it'll
always best
happen.
to ask the question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Abuelo says in the chat, I'm a recreational scuba instructor. Want to go through tech and cave training. This season, my team is formed by 70% women and 30% men,
Hey,
which I found
cool.
awesome. So that's nice to hear. I think I
Yeah.
saw something in the news about a month ago that, yeah, female students are at a record level through, I think it was Paddy. So yeah, we're definitely getting there.
Yeah, that's great.
um, and finally, what are your hopes for the impact of diving into the darkness, and how do you see it influencing the public perception of cave diving or exploration in
Mhm.
general?
Well, I'm really proud that it's a positive film and that it, talks about some of the wonder of the things that we learn and see underground. There's a lot of there's a lot of darkness in the world these days, and so I really wanted it to be affirmative for people, maybe empower them to step outside of their comfort zone, whether it's in cave diving or in other aspects of their life, and um, and just know that like crazy impossible things are achievable when you put your mind to it. And if you're facing barriers or if you're facing the pressures of social media or otherwise, um, you know, just let go of that. It's difficult, it's painful, it causes anxiety, but it's not about you. It's about the person that wrote the post.
Mhm.
So just stay the course, get out into the world, explore, and know that you can do it.
Oh, well, thank you so very much for joining me, Jill.
Hey, you know what?
Are we up?
Before we sign off, though, I
Yes.
have to share. Have to share.
Of
I just
course.
came home from an extraordinary expedition. We've just found Shackleton's last ship, the
Yeah.
Quest, in the
Uh,
Labrador Sea, and I'm still just like bursting with excitement. But for anyone that hasn't seen the world news this week, it's kind of on every front page.
yeah.
Again, happy news, exploration news, and I'm really proud of our team
Yeah.
that included some
How
folks
how
in the UK as well. Yeah.
yeah, how were you involved in the expedition?
So I'm part of the team for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. There were 13 of us in total on the ship, and I was doing all the photography and videography, and we'll be going back with an ROV soon to
Very cool.
gather some more historic images of the wreck.
Yeah. Outstanding. So how can anyone follow you going forwards on
Oh
social
yeah.
media channels?
Well, if you're, following news on the film, go to divingintothedarkness.com. If you want to learn more about me or about my book, intotheplanet.com. And my book, Into the Planet, and the kids' book, The Aquanaut, are also available on Amazon everywhere. So if you want to read a bit deeper into my projects and life, then that's probably a good way to do it.
Marvelous. Well, thank you so very much for joining me, Jill. And I've
Thanks.
already said thank you to Nate.
Great.
Congratulations on the film and all of
Thank
the
you.
awards that are coming with it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to speak with you.
Right, guys, we're going to end it there. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
This is going to sort of continue on. You can sort of watch it afterwards. But yeah, I saw Diving into the Darkness last week, and yeah, it is incredible. So if you can get your hands on it, it's definitely worth watching it. And yeah, thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving. Right, someone literally just messaged me and covered up the button to stop it.